great privilege, Dr. Nelson Riquet, to have you for the second time on Geospatial FM. Yes, in your capacity as a cognitive science researcher at Penn State University, but we're also talking about some of the things you do in your own time. So welcome back. Take us through it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I think, the message that I'll say at the beginning and I'll probably say it at the end is AI agents changed my life. I think what I've been able to do in almost like maybe only 2 weeks since owning this Mac Mini is extraordinary. I'm part of the reason why Mac Mini sales are essentially through the roof right now, and in some cases are sold out at local stores. So it's something that I'm really excited to talk about. Part of what I'm going to go over today are a couple of geospatial examples of things that I've built, and then I thought we could build something together. So I'll just pull up, Openclaw, and we'll build, just some idea that comes to mind together. And I think along the way, what I want to talk about is some kind of like meta points, I think, around, the value of data. And I know that sounds silly to say or obvious to say, but in just a minute, you'll see kind of where that's coming from. And then I think I also want to kind of commend what is a more modern ecosystem for like deploying web applications. Because I do have networking experience. I've done a lot of web application development in the past, but the idea that I can write single commands to take what I have built and just get it out on the internet with a domain name is truly powerful. And the fact that I can then take that and pair that with, Openclaw means that I can be building products, ideas, and really testing the feasibility of things that are just stuck in my mind all day in minutes and not months or years.
Yeah.
So it's been something really, really beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Really great to be having an episode about what everyone seems to be talking about right now, which is not just AI agents. I remember there was a market research paper last year saying this would be the year of AI agents. It looks like they're right. The last sort of hypey concept that everyone was talking about was vibe coding, but Openclaw really seems to be the next crystallization of these various concepts. So yeah, great to be spending an episode on what you can do.
Yeah, well, thank you again. So the first thing I'll mention, and this is something that maybe you can share with your viewers in the description, but Bilawal Sidhu created something called Worldview, and maybe you've seen it by now on LinkedIn or Twitter.
No,
It is something that I think everyone should go look at. It's essentially a platform that was created over a weekend. And it's something that looks like it might have taken years in the olden days, where we had, teams of developers making something. And so what his application is a way to look at any part of the world and then the related kind of auxiliary geospatial data that's around there. So imagine I can click on an intersection and look at a particle system that's traffic density in that area live. I can also look at CCTV footage, and I can look at 3 specific cameras from different vantage points. And this was all vibe coded in a weekend. And so I think that giving people back, if you will, boundless creativity is really, I think, kind of the meta message here. It's just been so fun. And I think that episode that Bilawal did not too long ago is really just something that is a testament to what I'm about to show you.
By particle density, is that a reference to the air quality points you were making in the last episode we had?
No, sorry. This would be, and maybe I misspoke there, but like imagine like we wanted to visualize traffic flow along a street. And so it would put essentially like fake particles as vehicles and show them flowing at different rates to visualize the traffic flow.
Okay. All right. Yep. So there's even traffic modeling applications for this. Okay. So no industry is immune.
No industry untouched. So I'm going to show you 3 examples of things that I've built, and I'll kind of go over the build process and a little bit more details as I show each. But one of them is to give us the ability to look at satellite imagery over any given area, but in a way that's accessible to the general public. And I'll explain kind of where I'm coming from there. Another example is to visualize flight data. So essentially almost like FlightAware or OpenSkyMap, but maybe with a more modern UI. And then the third one is essentially looking at CCTV footage overlaid on a US map, so you can drop into any part and go look at something. So I'll take you first to the Wildfire Explorer. All right, so this is the Wildfire Explorer. There was a wildfire in the Naples region of Florida, and essentially in that area, I just wanted to see what it looked like and how large the wildfire was. So I created this web application essentially to use available satellite imagery in that region. But you can also set a custom AOI, or in this case, pick one of the presets that I loaded. So what I'll do is I'll play out, in this case, the wildfire in the southwest region of Florida. And so you see it, I
Okay.
guess you might have seen it just in that moment, essentially start.
Yep.
And so this was something where, it was really cool to see it in the news and then just like build this web application and see it in satellite imagery. Like there was just something really special about just kind of being able to put that together. That was built with the web stack of Next.js. And I use that basically because it's very powerful and very flexible. So part of what you'll see next is very similar in style. But the general idea is that I've now found a common like recipe for building these things that kind of makes it easy. And so, I'm happy to share that Next.js was one of the open source frameworks that really made this work truly, I think, easy to do. So the next one I'll show
Hang
is,
on. Can I
yeah,
can I just ask some questions about that one?
yeah.
So you saw that there was this fire in southern Florida, did you say, on the news? And what did you do? Did you open WhatsApp and start messaging Openclaw to create this? And how long did it take?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, essentially along the lines of what you're saying, I started chatting with Openclaw and I said, I want to build a web application that allows me to look at satellite imagery. I want it to be accessible by the general public, so nothing that would require costly API tokens. And I want to be able to visualize this, with as much available geospatial locations as possible. The specific region I care about now is Naples, Florida, but be generic because I want to be able to show other examples. Almost exactly like that in natural language. And what I got back was a version 1 that basically did what I said. It just looked really ugly. And so at that point, I used the Next.js stack for a lot of the underlying like React framework components. But then I used something called Tailwind UI for a lot of the visuals that you saw. So I wanted that Matrix sci-fi style. So I just said, I want the Matrix sci-fi style. And, I think that's something that in the olden days when I used to do MySpace coding for my friends, like I do remember how to do that, but do I want to spend 10 to 30 minutes looking up a very specific part of CSS to then implement one line of code? Or do I want to spend 10 minutes and build my whole idea? And so that's kind of the time it took. I think it was roughly around 10 minutes of interacting back and forth via chat to get that. I did not touch any code other than a couple labels that I didn't like. And I'm not trying to pay API tokens for label changes. So like I can do those myself, but everything else was basically coded for me.
That's so amazing. And I've heard that you can make it use, Grok for some things. I don't know, DeepSeek for other things. Is this in the settings for OpenClaw somehow?
Yeah, and I can show that actually. I can take a moment to walk you through the Openclaw control, which is kind of like the command system. Okay, so here is, for example, one of the channels called Agent Brain, and it's essentially the generic agent that knows how to do pretty much anything. This one was making something with a Twilio bot. I have another agent called Compliance, where it does compliance reporting on repositories. And it gives just general ideas of what's good, what's bad. Um, I've created another one that's for design, so it created a distraction-free writer for me. So what I've chosen to do is essentially wire up Openclaw's channel, in this case Slack, to have many different agents. I did a reset just to kind of show you and maybe even walk you through some of those steps today. But do you have the ability to configure almost an infinite number of agents? And each of those agents, you, as you were saying, you can come here and select the model.
Okay.
So for purposes of speed and kind of lowering cost and token limits and things like that, I'm using kind of the lower model normally by default. But I can load up here, 24 models and have in this selector, options to choose from.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw the same thing. There's this guy, yeah, I think he's associated with MIT, and he talked about a tiered approach like that, and for what he knew would be a more complex sort of thing for the agent to respond to using a more expensive, I guess, framework. Yeah, amazing. And can Openclaw somehow automatically determine which one to use based on its anticipation of how difficult things are, or is that what you then have to do?
Well, okay, so I think wasn't prepared to go over agent configuration a whole lot,
Sorry,
so I
I'm
can
putting you on
no,
the
no, it's
spot.
okay. I can go over it like a little bit. So you can configure a job to use agents that are like ephemeral. So like you can just say, hey, I want you to split your work up arbitrarily into these 3 units, a boss, a person that does copywriting, and a person that does graphics. The graphics and the copywriter need to show it to the hypothetical agent boss, and the agent boss reviews it and gives feedback. And so it just kind of goes in circles for some number of minutes. And so, yeah, you can have one agent, the boss, that has perhaps, either a smaller or larger brain, depending on kind of what
Yeah.
your mental model there is. And then you can then have a situation where, an agent that only needs to produce markdown documentation maybe just needs like the smallest of brains, or maybe even like a local model on your machine.
Crazy.
So part of what I've been doing also and playing with is using Olama local models and playing with the Quen models,
Yep.
and being able to get some just extraordinary output just from literally this Mac Mini that's sitting like 6 inches away from me.
Yeah, I've also come across this idea of using Mac Minis as almost like your local home data center type thing. So yeah, amazing to have it live coming from someone who's gone into this feet first. And Quen is from Alibaba, am I right?
I believe so. At the
Yeah,
time, it was the model that ran best on the base model Mac Mini that I got.
gotcha.
There are people that are doing really cool stuff where they'll take like 5 or 6 Mac Minis and turn them into a cluster. And
Yeah.
I'm not quite there yet, but I think, give me maybe later this year and maybe I will be. I'm having too much fun with this.
All right, that'll be episode number 3 for sure.
All
Okay, all
right.
right, good to have some coverage also of the Chinese open models as well, because I understand in the league tables they're towards the top. So yeah, good. Okay, all right, I'll stop interrupting.
All good. All right. So the next thing I'll show is essentially the interactive, flight aware system. So this is something that is not working today. This could be a good example of something where I'm going to do nothing other than ask questions and we'll get this fixed. And so in this case, what I intended to have is I think it's Open Sky map data, or yeah, Open Sky data to show the different planes in different regions. You'd be able to click a plane and get flight data like you would on those, public websites like Flight Radar. And for some reason or another, between last time I vibe coded and today, this is now giving an Open Sky error. I could spend some time looking into that, but I think what I'm going to do instead is have Openclaw just fix it. So bear with me here. I'm trying to set up a new session. Okay. Okay. So this is actually a funny example of something that it could also do. So my monitor stayed on with a job that I was running, and it was so bright that I was able to see it from my bedroom. So I sent it a message basically to turn off the monitor, and it turned off the monitor.
This is
So I'll just
absolutely
use that chat
wild.
as the baseline.
So it's really got control of the whole machine.
The whole machine. And so
That is
before I go any
nuts.
further, I think what I want to say also for kind of learning purposes is that I am kind of taking the maybe very extreme approach of setting up the Mac Mini where it's a Mac Mini that is, fresh out of the box from Best Buy and configured with an iCloud account that is its own, configured with a Gmail that is its own.
Oh my God.
I'm not quite at the level of having its own phone number, but it has its own Slack. And so it is quite literally firewalled from my life. It doesn't have access to anything personal. The only thing it has are these prompts that I've given it to
Okay.
do the work that, yeah.
And what it infers about you from those prompts. Okay.
Correct.
Crazy.
From its own ChatGPT account. So I've also given it its own ChatGPT account for this.
I love it.
Yeah, so I think, what I would not suggest is that somebody then installs this on their work computer, for example, or home computer. So just, I thought I would just say that explicitly. Um, all right, so in this case, what we're going to work with is this app, and I'm going to tell it in this case that
So
so yeah, sorry.
could you also have sent a WhatsApp message to it if you got its own phone number? Is that what
So
is implied when people say they're using WhatsApp with it?
So you can set it up with WhatsApp with your real phone number, and then at that point, what is a little funky in the UI is that you're messaging yourself. And so for, if you will, simplicity, a lot of people buy a separate like eSIM and essentially have its own phone number. So it's not like messaging yourself; it's messaging some named, contact in your phone book. Um,
So crazy.
yeah, so you don't necessarily have to give it its own number, but you could. In this case, I could message it from Slack. So maybe I'll do an example of that after. So in this case, we're waiting a little bit, and maybe in the meantime, I can show you one of the other web applications.
Sure.
Um, so this is a mini commercial for Vercel where I've basically hosted most of the applications. So bear with me. I'm pulling up now the CCTV Explorer. So part of what I did purposely is center the map on an area where I have no data. So I relied on Openclaw to search the wide internet and say, where is there live cam footage that's open and public and accessible for things like this? And it turns out that the states that had the most data available were New York, California, but I was also curious of states that I've lived in, so I pulled cameras in Florida and Pennsylvania. But some of the other states either didn't have easy to access cameras or not easily readily available feeds that would list which cameras were available. And so this is one of the first things that made me realize that I can vibe code all day long, but if the underlying data is still not a CSV file of every CCTV camera ever, this is only going to be a dashboard then of whatever data sources I was able to crawl and find. So, I think the meta
We're
point
safe
is,
then, to a certain extent.
yeah, and a little bit, I think, for now. Give it a couple weeks. So
May
what
the
I'll
terribly managed data of humanity in general continue to protect us from the bot swarm. Yes.
Yes, maybe that's the answer, and maybe there's a story there that I'll tell you later. So in this case, I'm pulling up the state of New York, so I just kind of drew the bounding box there. And what are listed here are 897 cameras in that AOI. So I'm going to scroll down. In this case, this camera doesn't have a live stream, but it does have a snapshot every 1 minute. I'll pick another one. This is an area, it's funny enough, but where I do research. So I'm kind of like doing research actively in this area, and I could see the area from this camera, which is just its own interesting meta point.
Again, is this air quality research when you say research?
Yeah, I do research on aging, so essentially cognitive aging and cognitive neuroscience, essentially looking at the onset and the monitoring of dementia. But yeah, also the site where I do the air quality work and measure air quality in humans. So I'll just click through a couple of the other ones just so you can see the sparseness in data quality. So I'm sure you're seeing now this very pixelated view for a moment. I'll just click through a couple others. So I think the general idea is that, it would be amazing that, the product of sorts is the production of really rich, maintained curated data sets. Because, I'm basically going to show you then just a bunch of cameras that are off, or cameras that are no longer working. So anyway, that was just kind of a quick example while I get the other open
Another
claw.
way to look at it is that it's absolutely stunning how you can produce a really compelling little web experience. And again, did that only take 10 minutes?
So that one was probably a little longer because it had to do a little bit of like thinking and planning in terms of like finding the CCTV feeds. And we actually had to iterate on the concept of, hey, I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's not like a CSV of CCTV footage. So do you want to pick like 2 or 3 states? And I was like, let's pick four. And then, yeah, sure, let's do it. So yeah, it took about like 20 minutes. But that's something that maybe has been in my dreams, my sci-fi dreams forever. And like now I can just like think of it for a couple minutes and like wait a couple minutes and like have it and
Yep.
play with it.
Yeah.
So it's, I describe it as like, a kid in a candy store or a kid in a toy store. Like I can kind of have that level of boundless creativity again.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
this idea is common, it appears. So, as I was saying in the lead up to this episode, there was and I'll put it in the show notes, of course, there was a New York Times columnist who is a veteran of the IT industry. He leads, whole organizations, and he also was writing about how he's had ideas for years. And with this tooling, he's suddenly able to just, set a bunch of those ideas into motion. So there's this flowering suddenly across the population, really, it seems, of people suddenly be able to make applications that they've not been able to do themselves or been afraid of the cost if they got a dev team on it. So, yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So in this case, maybe 4 minutes ago, and I was showing you the other thing, so I didn't notice, but 4 minutes ago, it solved the problem. So essentially 2 minutes of work. And in this case, the map that wasn't working is back on.
Crazy.
I'm going to center it to my AOI and my current location. Oh, I guess I didn't give it access to my GPS. But if I did, I'd be able to center it in my area. I can also move around the world, so I can kind of zoom out and maybe look at flights in another area. And so this is something that, a lot of websites offer. You'll see this on FlightAware and Flight Radar and even the website that provides this data feed. But I just wanted something that looked a little bit more cool. So I just asked it to give me something that looked a little bit more cool. Give it maybe a dark neon vibe and, maybe give me a little bit of something that would be almost like visualized in a movie.
That's
And
so
I
cool.
feel I feel like that's what I got. Just really excited about this one as well.
And
This was, yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
I mean, so we've got a link then to SynMax, which was a guest, one of the companies that Bill Perkins founded along with Skyfire. They've also been a guest. But a theme that came up to extend this idea of tracking vehicles or vessels or something was one of SynMax's products is to find and track the dark fleet of oil and gas or hydrocarbon transport, and this whole issue of companies getting around sanctions and doing ship-to-ship transfers of hydrocarbons, on the high seas with all the risks that come with that. So it would be really interesting because that you've got the first sort of level there where there's an open feed of data, it seems. But it will be really interesting to see is, to spend, 20 hours rather than 20 minutes with one of these systems to see how far it could get, replacing what Synmax presumably charges an arm and a leg for, to oil and gas companies, to governments, to enforcement agencies. It would be really interesting to see, how deep these systems can go as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think just to comment on that, I was talking to a mentor about this idea of Openclaw and the power of it, and his one recommendation was to pick one idea and really go deep and really spend the 10 or 20 hours instead of the 10 or 20 minutes, and really just kind of nurture the idea. Because if this is how far we can get to test feasibility and test, does it work? Is this thing on? What can we do in 20 hours? So I actually have one of those ideas that I'm not necessarily going to show on the show today because it's necessarily IP that I'm working on, but I'm happy to show you later, just more offline. But yeah, no, I do think that it is that powerful. That 10 hours of this is, in my opinion, close to 6 months of real time.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how I've felt it in my interactions.
It's a stunning multiplier. And I know it's unfashionable to talk about Microsoft Copilot, but I'm going to. Like it is genuinely transformative what Copilot can do unleashed in the Windows ecosystem. So I've recently started a new job, and Copilot has this app called Facilitator, and you can invite it to essentially run your meeting. It can be a meeting coach. Halfway through, it'll tell you you're halfway through the meeting. This is what you've covered on the agenda, as you put it into, Outlook in the calendar or Teams when you booked a meeting. And then at the end, it'll give you a summary of what the action items were. And then you can also, because it listens to the whole meeting, I used it as a coach to ask it how it thought I went as the facilitator of a meeting myself, and it gives me pointers and says, where you went well, where you didn't go so well. But it's also it goes it's like you can speak to the organization. It's like the organization is personified through Copilot, and it will go and find all the, random Word documents that are available to all members of the organization that relate to a topic you're having a conversation about. You don't have to go to your boss, and I'm new to this organization, so I don't have to harass my boss all the time to induct me into whatever topic. I can just go to Copilot first, and I end up looking really knowledgeable and telling him things he never knew about. So and another thing to say here is that I think on the 4th, I think it was the 4th of February, the first few days of February, there was a comment piece from, I think, 3 people in Nature, arguably the world's leading science journal, saying that we have, for all intents and purposes, reached AGI version 1. And it's these kind of things that you're putting in front of us, and also my experience with the unfashionable AI from the world's IT monopolist, that do lead me to conclude we just have to say that we have a AGI version 1. There are problems, but nevertheless, we need to shift to just thinking of ourselves as going through life now with AGI. Please comment. Cognitive science researcher from Penn State University. What crimes have I just committed?
Well, I think the way that I can maybe say it back to you is I don't necessarily think we have AGI version 1, but I think Openclaw could be used to build AGI version 1. I think we now have kind of this, like you said, multiplier where, you have ChatGPT that in itself is intelligent, but it paired with its own agents to build its next level intelligence, I think is where we're going. But I don't know that we're there yet. Like right now, like for example, if I wanted to have an agent that does something, I would have to spend 10 or so minutes getting it to like understand what I mean. And I think AGI would be like, I write one sentence, it's like, got you, here's your next JS project.
Yeah.
And it's I don't think it's quite there yet. I think we're on the cusp, and I think people that could or have the math knowledge or all the other technical expertise to build AGI that maybe don't have the software chops or the programming chops now can do magic in minutes.
I like this self-replication theme that you're bringing up. And it would be a genuine sign, sure, if a lower level AI was a building block in producing AGI, so called. There's differing grades or levels of credulity too, and I presume I'm lower down on the ladder of credulity there. What else is there was some? Maybe I'll cut this out. There was another point. Anyway, I wasn't wanting to get. I wasn't prepared for getting into this. But yeah, at least we brought it up.
I appreciate it. I think it's kind of related to our point last time we spoke, where I think it's a lot to say that something's AGI or something has cognition, and I think a human would be able to see the flaw in like a sentence and maybe be able to respond in such a way to elicit the right information back. And I also don't think we're always there yet with some of these AIs and like what it can perceive about you. It like has almost kind of one perspective, and it'll run with that perspective over and over. And so I think humans have that inherent ability to take perspectives that I think you can train or create an agent that does that, or I've even seen people create simulated boardrooms where you have kind of a board of directors that is just a bunch of agents with different personas talking to each other, workshopping an idea and coming to a decision. And then that decision gets taken to the real board of directors. And so it has, a flavor of a first pass, a try over, a do over.
Yeah.
And so I do think that we're playing with magic.
Yeah.
That's my experience. Yeah.
And if that means that there was effort and time getting those real board members together that doesn't need to be spent, that's meaningful. I want to say another thing that helped me get across the line to we have AGI version 1 in this comment piece in Nature was that they went through, there was 10 sort of lines of attack that usually are used to say, no, we don't have it. And one of them was there have been no formal new mathematical proofs that AGI has come up with. And actually, they were able to cite a paper where it did produce independently genuine progress in a new mathematical proof. And another one, a common one that I'm often talking about on LinkedIn is world models, only because it's a way to highlight how the geospatial profession can offer some progress there. And actually, they admitted, that this is a problem, but then they said that there is some evidence of LLM-based AI nevertheless managing to detect some aspects of a world model in some particular domain. So they did, give up the point partially, but they also said there's evidence of nevertheless some independent emergence of a world model somehow. So yeah, a lot of qualifications there. But yeah. Anyway, great to progress the thinking about whether we have AGI again with a cognitive science researcher. It's only under these conditions that I'm willing to advance my opinion here. So yeah, good to have what I think is the right kind of what can I say, broker around opinions here on the show.
Well, I appreciate that. I do think that this is maybe the moment where I'll ask you if we have time to build something together.
Let's go. Yep.
All right. So
let's use AGI version 1.
AGI version
this is the make or break moment, do we?
All right. So I'm going to do my best to kind of recount what you had said the other day, or you can tell me again and I can write it exactly.
Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you.
Yeah,
I've got a watch on. And in a previous life, somehow as an expression of mine and a co-host's interest in our first degrees, because both of us studied psychology at an undergraduate level, we observing that all of the investor literature, all of the best, most successful investors say that managing your urges, managing behavior, managing your temperament is what sets you apart in the market as an investor. We decided to run a show called The Behavioral Investor. And what came up as the theme amongst several psychologists that we talked with, we had people from Ogilvy, a successful British advertising or marketing agency on, a theme amongst all of them. We also had a PhD student from Warwick University who became like a leader on the behavioral science team at Commonwealth Bank in Australia, the largest bank there. So a theme across all of them was this concept of hyperbolic discounting. And there's actually a formula where you can plug in the amount of money that you're thinking of having in the future, the number of years into the future that it is. And basically there's a decay formula which reduces in an exponential way the impression of the value of the money the further away from now that it is into the future. And sort of a thread throughout the show was a spreadsheet that the other co-hosts put together of how to, over a 3-generation compounding strategy, you could get to $1 billion on a basic salary. And you would have one person, starting off, and then they'd have a child, and the child and the parent would be contributing for a time. Then the parent would pass away, the child would continue on, and their child would then contribute in a similar way, with some overlapping of contributions, and just using the average market compounding rate. So ultimately about 7% adjusted for inflation, you could get to $1 billion. But the thing is, it would take 108 years for that to happen. With the other assumptions, I mentioned the compounding rate, but also where you could still have a life, but you were contributing a significant amount per year of your salary. So it would take 108 years, we thought, and the formula basically said that $1 billion in 108 years, right now, because of hyperbolic discounting, only feels like having $10,000. And so the motivational power of that amount of money, because it's only $10,000, feels much less than imagine yourself having $1 billion. So this explains so much of why people don't engage in long-term investing behavior, don't end up with great outcomes when it comes to time for them to retire. A lot of people don't have enough money saved up. It explains really a lot of the problems we see around urge management. Because in the end, when you understand it in the context of hyperbolic discounting, people really aren't as irrational as they might appear to be, or it's easier to understand why people are apparently irrational and don't invest in great outcomes when it comes to very long-term saving behavior. And a way to get around that, we understood through interviewing a clinical psychologist who happened to be one of my fellow students when I was doing my psychology degree. He talked about episodic future thinking, which is a general, you're nodding your head here, you've probably heard about it. I imagine it's in general use in many ways in psychology, especially treatment. But it's the idea of deliberately, thoughtfully going through a multi-sensory, multi-channel imagining of what the reward state might be. So you're imagining all the smells that you have when you have that $1 billion at your disposal. You're imagining how how things actually feel when you touch the things that you buy or have the experiences that you could have with that amount of money. You imagine the things you're hearing. You imagine the taste that you have. So this is the concept of episodic future thinking. Through this multisensory imaginary experience, you're actually juicing the dopamine reward system. You're tricking it through this highly detailed imaginary episode. So maybe you can speak to the validity of these ideas first, Nelson. And so inevitably what came from that was this basic idea of a watch app where you put in what you're proposing to buy. And like the classic example is the watch itself, it costs $600. But if you compound the value of that at 7.5% for, I'm 42, the average lifespan gives me another 42 years to live. So the watch app would compound that $600 at 7.5% for 42 years and tell me at the point of death, it's all a bit morbid, but what the watch is actually worth at that period or at that time. So yeah, how am I sounding?
No, I mean, I think it is an interesting concept that I've played with before. So episodic future thinking is something that I think would also apply to like research on air pollution. I think getting people to think about the future climate that they'd like to have, the air that they'd like to be breathing, maybe even imagining the air that they're breathing now, and do they expect it to get better in the future by not doing anything? And so I think I've played with the concept kind of around hopefully getting people to have better environmental behavior. So, I think you did a really good job explaining that. I think
Good.
what
Glad I
I
passed
did
muster in front of a professor.
I in the background, to not kind of take up much time, during the episode, I took what you were saying, I typed it into ChatGPT, and I said, give me an Openclaw prompt. And that's kind of a trick that I've learned as I've been doing this more. So I'll kind of share that with you all, that it's kind of amazing when you can take one AI to speak in the language that the other AI would like to receive its instructions. And so it writes out these blueprints that have, guidelines, deliverables, interim check-ins, and things that you need to do along the way. Interim files, so I can actually just keep my file explorer open and just take a peek as another file loads in and another file loads in. So it's truly amazing. So I have basically ChatGPT enhancing my prompts, and then I feed those to Openclaw. So I have this kind of
It's amazing what humanity is currently engaged in right now. I mean, look at us. It's completely bonkers.
Well, I have something a comment on that in just a moment as well. Essentially
We've all gone mad, but it's amazing.
So this is the prompt. It's kind of a very enhanced version of what you were saying with the formula.
Oh,
And
cool.
in this case, it's been running for 5 minutes. Maybe just a little bit longer, but
Still chewing
uh,
away. Okay.
yeah, it's still chewing through. But you mentioned something that I wanted to comment on, perhaps in this episode as well, which is kind of the AI perhaps overconsumption that we're starting to also see. So there was a commentary recently about water and AI and how using AI is like dumping a bunch of water bottles down the drain. So I actually played with AI to, explore the concept and kind of think about some of the assumptions that went into that, and perhaps characterizing what humans do also. So a human can take a long shower, a human can have a very unproductive day. So in some ways, what it does is that it creates kind of this larger separation between kind of what the agent is producing in terms of product per water. But the important point that I want to frame this with is that humans also do other very essential things with water, like hygiene and household activities. So this was just more of like a toy example of number one, a dashboard, because it built this dashboard in a couple minutes, but also just kind of taking a concept that you might want to explore and giving yourself almost a way to do it visually with graphs or whatever else you feel you need to understand that concept better. So I was really just curious of this comparison, and I wanted to see some of the underlying assumptions of it. So yeah, this was
Is this idea that every little prompt, even if it's 5 words long, results in I don't know how X liters of water being consumed?
we have these systems that are running our prompts, whether it be thank you or a very very long prompt like what you just saw. And those systems have to heat and cool GPUs and a whole building of them. And so in the situation that you're writing a prompt like thank you, it's not probably necessarily like spilling a whole water bottle. But if you kind of look at it at scale, because these are kind of cost as if your one prompt was powering the whole data center, but it's distributed and there's millions of people with subscriptions. So I think it brings down the factor of the water costs quite down, because I think some of those ways of thinking have almost meant that like you're the owner of the data center and you're just the owner of the
I see.
subscription.
Great point. There's economies of scale here. So could you bring the dashboard back up and give us a feel for what an average, paragraph of worth of a prompt might result in terms of water consumption?
So this is, I would say, like maybe the part that I don't want to go into too much because I think like I would want to check the math more if I'm being
Okay.
honest with you. But I think just more for the aspect of like if you're okay with me just kind of like showing the dashboard,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I just want to be clear with you that like some math might need checked by
This
the
is not
economist.
authoritative, but at least it's an example of how Openclaw allows you to spontaneously explore an idea via an app.
Yeah, and then I think in this case, an economist could check my work, and I would appreciate that. So in this case, one of the assumptions that I'll make is, let's say the average human shower is about 12 minutes. Humans work for about 8 hours a day, although the prompt here is saying productive. So maybe let's just kind of lower that to, I don't know, 6.5 or 7. And then let's kind of think about, some meta parameters. So you use a lot of other water, you use drinking water, you do other things aside from showering. And so if you kind of add it all up, there's probably other water consumption happening, maybe to the tune of 250 or who knows, 300 liters. And then the way that I kind of wanted to conceptualize this was amount of tokens per day. This is coming from somewhere, and I'll show you Openclaw's usage in a moment, but Openclaw can chew through quite a bit of tokens. So I was, in a way, getting self-conscious about that. So I was curious to play with, some really large numbers, like let's say Openclaw did 5 million tokens that day. And there are some versions of this calculus where the AI agents is using more water, if you will, over unit time. But the average user of an Openclaw is probably not using 5 million tokens. Perhaps they're using closer to 10,000 or 100,000. And so kind of the general idea that I'm trying to show without any mathematical specifics is, this generic separation where the AI agents is generally more productive, even though it is using water the same way
A
humans.
unit of water, it's more productive than the human. Oh dear. The
Yeah,
Matrix is winning. We
yeah,
need to get on our battery pods right now.
yeah, it's not good. So this is basically what I have so far. So we're at 5:23 start, and in this case 5:28 end. So 5 minutes. And what I'll do here is I'm gonna share my whole screen because I need to do some stuff in a terminal. Because I realized I was only sharing the window there. All right, so I use Positron as my IDE of choice. I can get
Haven't
into
heard of it.
that more or
Awesome.
less later, but Posit has done a really good job with this IDE. So what I'm going to do now is load up the project that we just created, in this case, purchase future value. And you'll notice that it's a full-fledged project. It has
Great.
text and copy, calculators, and I wrote none of this code. So it's a pretty substantial amount of code and project, and 5 minutes of time where you and I got to talk about really cool things. So
It's not
I think
commenting the code though.
what is it?
I don't see any comment lines in the code.
I don't know that I asked it to,
Okay.
so I can ask it to, and maybe it would, but I think by default it didn't. That's an
Okay.
interesting point.
You'll double the token usage.
Yeah, exactly. That too. So what I typically do is I have it do a documentation pass when I'm done with the project,
Gotcha.
and just kind of create both like inline and also like markdown documentation of how to run the project.
Sure.
Because I've created a bunch of these, and maybe once you've made 20 of them, you forgot how the first one worked. All right, so can you see my full screen?
Yeah, but it's kind of narrow. It's not taking up the whole width of the
Okay,
screen. But
let me fix that. Now that I launched. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see now?
yep.
All right. So in this case, we'll put in a purchase amount. So
Before
let's.
you buy it, protect what that money could become. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
All right.
So it came up with that, did it?
It did it. I wrote
Amazing.
nothing. I wrote no
Crazy.
copy.
I
Um,
love it.
okay, and I didn't even upload an audio recording. Like I just transcribed as best I could some of the things you said.
Great.
All right. So in this case, what would be the purchase amount you'd want to use?
I put $600 in. I think that's what I paid in 2020 for my watch. I think maybe earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Current age, if you don't mind.
42.
All right. Oops, not 102. Oh, it's because of the input. So, okay, so this is actually a really good example of something that we'll iterate on. So I press backspace and I can't. I would have to use these to go all the way up to 42, which,
No problem.
yeah, it's not so bad, but we'll have it fixed that in a moment. All right, so what percent do you want me to use? 2, 4, or 6?
So 6 is closest to what the long-term 150-year American market compounding rate is adjusted for inflation. Yeah, 6%.
So in this case, those $600 would be closer to almost $10,000.
And it's compounding until for how many more years?
In this case, for 48 more years to a target age of 90.
Okay, okay, perfect. Well, yes, that's exactly my point. So effectively, what I have said to myself in spending $600 today buying that watch is I do not want to have $10,000 basically to pass on to the next generation when I die. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And I want to crystallize this as impactfully as I can to people to make them realize truly the weight of each purchasing decision, the weight truly in how much less they're passing on to the next generation to set them up for life, you know. Overall, the overall framework is that being a worker for life is not necessarily virtuous activity, is not necessarily a virtuous thing. Because if you're having to, go slave away at the coal mine, and you're, what can I say, consigning every future generation of yours to that, with black lung disease, we're talking about air pollution and all that comes with that, that isn't necessarily virt- uh, a virtuous, it's not a, it's not the best approach to life, I don't think. And in saying that, I feel slightly uneasy because I come from a working class background where I've been told, it's in the fiber of my being, that the first thing as a man, particularly, that I must express allegiance to is the idea of being a worker. But actually, it is the case that with some long-term consistent investing behavior, that doesn't require anything spectacular and doesn't require an account with Goldman Sachs, you can, around about 3 generations, dig your family out of a paycheck to paycheck life. And you can set your all future generations up for a different way of looking at the world, a world of opportunity and acting on good ideas at scale, backed by, capital.
No, I mean, I'll be honest, this was probably one of the first times that I've been exposed to the idea. I've probably seen it in a textbook at one point in my life, but like you explaining it to me was probably one of the first times I think I've ever like seen it so clearly. And now what I'm about to show you is a picture that makes it even more clear, perhaps. So I showed you first a dashboard that was a first pass from the first prompt. So basically, little effort. And now we have a second iteration where I told it to create some graphs because people love graphs. So we now have basically what you were saying visualized. It's a little bit redundant now. So let's kind of go back and, okay, so I just realized what happened. So it just finished its work, or it's about to finish its work. So it relaunched a web application.
Does that on its own without warning?
Essentially, because I have it in dev mode, which runs it with reload. So that's more of like for the purposes of today's demo.
Love it.
But in this case, it caught that there was an issue and it fixed it. So in this case, it realized it's not done yet. So it hasn't responded to us. But if I were to start playing with this, I can get a sense of what it's doing underneath.
It's responsive. That was immediate.
And then in this case, I wanted to add a lifespan perspective. I am an aging researcher after all. So
Yeah.
I wanted it to do an explain like I'm 5, explain like I'm 20, explain like I'm 40. And essentially they're the same explanation, the same dollar amount, but trying to kind of make this something I can go tell my daughter right after this episode. And I think that's kind of the major part behind what you're saying is that there needs to be an accessibility to this understanding. And I think, visual tools definitely do that a lot.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to hit people in the face on their watch. Like what I had this idea of is that the next thing is you can have your phone camera reading the barcodes. You know how there's these really cool nutrition apps, and they'll tell you like, red light, green light, orange light, whether or not you should buy the Pringles or the organic, local food alternative. I want the same sort of responsive behavior where as you walk down the aisle at Best Buy, you just put down, I don't know, $600 on a Mac Mini. I want that immediate awareness, literally, of how much less I am giving to the next generation, and therefore by how much I am delaying the next generation exiting the paycheck to paycheck life and instead entering into a mode where it's the only thing that their lives come down to is, have I got an idea that is worth scaling? So it comes down to them being cultivated individuals and responsible people, so that when they have money to, execute on ideas at scale, they are ones that have good outcomes. So it sets you up for, it requires a slightly different way of cultivating the next generation or cultivating a person, that you are not raising a hard worker necessarily, someone who's willing to make great sacrifices. And this is not to say that that's not a virtuous way of being, but just to say, once you've crossed the threshold and you can look at a life where you don't have to spend an hour for your entire life laboring because prior generations have engaged in consistent, sensible financial behaviors, so that you can live your whole life just in a mode of executing on ideas. That then means that your parents are responsible for, as I said, creating someone who thinks in a responsible way and generates ideas that have good outcomes when they are scaled or backed by a significant amount of money. So I just wanted to say that too, and also to comment on there's so many overlaps. I feel it's it's such a privilege to come across you, Nelson, because yeah, you being an aging researcher does mean that your research maps on, or you have a mindset that relates to these kind of concepts too.
No, and thank you for going through that. I mean, I think one thing that I'm going to show you is one of the side effects of using Openclaw, and what's probably happening behind the scenes here is blowing through many tokens. And I'll show you that maybe at the end as kind of the visual of that usage. But in this case, it bricked my UI. I asked it to fix it, and maybe it. Okay, so in this case, rebuild successfully, all good.
It's extremely basic now.
And it's like, not quite. So part of what's likely going on is that I need to do a rebuild in the positron IDE that I was showing you. So just bear with me here as I switch. I don't want to have to like pull up the whole thing over again. So I'm just going to do it here behind the scenes.
But I love it. You know, this is a demo, warts and all, of how it comes at you using Openclaw, and this is useful.
Yeah. So let's see. So there we go. I had to basically clear the cache and rerun it. I probably could have told Openclaw to figure that out, but I didn't want to blow through probably 10 to 20,000 tokens for something that I know how to do. So every once in a while, I kind of run up a point where it's like, I'll just go do it myself.
But that's a nice expression of the value of your thought. So you're literally then translating your thoughts into how many tokens. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we've gotten to as humanity. What are we worth in tokens?
Yeah, every conversation I'm now thinking in tokens, but no, but let's just kind of go through the example again of 600 and now this refreshed UI. So one of the main things I asked it to do was make it simpler. So it gives me presets for the target age. It slimmed out a lot of the text that maybe it didn't feel like it needed to be here.
Yeah.
And then it also added buttons for, increasing that amount or changing that amount. Sorry.
So can you put it at, because I'm 42 now, but I bought it actually 6 years ago. So I would have been 36, right? So can you put it as 36?
Yep.
So actually I have a 5-year-old daughter. So I decided then not to give her $14,000. And that's meaningful because once you start to think in this way, it's transformational. Because one thing that parents often do in other cultures, for example, I have some Chinese friends. When I actually attended his wedding in Qinghuangdao, on the coast, it's where on the east coast, the Great Wall of China literally starts in the sea. Anyway, so I went around to all the venues that are involved in, this grand Chinese wedding. It was fantastic. But where we all ended up was this rather swish new apartment that his parents, were required to bequeath to him and his new wife as part of their culture. I actually think that it's a really good thing to do. In the West, we're all consigned to, as soon as we become adults, getting on a 30-year mortgage. And what does a 30-year mortgage mean? It actually means you pay double, right? Half of the money that you pay over the life of that mortgage is the value of the house again to the bank. So if you, in this context, think about responsible behavior as a parent, financial behavior as a parent, well, it is that you will put away over your child's, from birth to 18, enough money so that you can hand them the value of a house, and that over their childhood, the bank or the investor class has been working effectively on your child's behalf, just with the money that you've given this investing system, such that when they turn 18, the first thing they do is go down the street and buy a simple apartment, 5 minutes walk from their university. You know what I mean? So immediately you enter into a different mode when you start to think in these ways. And so that $14,000 is actually a significant chunk of the around $20,000 that you as a parent, in my view, I'm going to use that word, should be investing the second your child is born, so that you make the market work for the child to give them the house that presently routine behavior, results in the average person signing up for 30 years of wage slavery and mortgage servitude. It's a shocking thing. So yeah, there's there's the potential for a really positive shift in thinking in these terms.
So in the while we were chatting there a moment, I had it just do one more UI update. So this was essentially a third pass over, what we were building together. Obviously, it included a disclaimer because it probably felt that was appropriate for any
Sure.
finances. And then it added, in this case, linear and log graphing, which I didn't ask for, but I appreciate.
It's noodling. I love it.
And so, I think, I can kind of pause the screen share on that, but, you just saw basically 5 minutes of work to kind of play out an idea on a web app. If I wanted to make this a watch app, I can probably just ask it to make it a watch app. And then that's something where, I don't know enough at iOS development to maybe get, that deployed or maybe in the App Store, but I can probably get a watch app that runs on this computer.
Yeah.
And maybe 10 more minutes. And
It's a Mac Mini after all.
yeah. So I do think that it's just been extraordinary for me to be able to find a new level of creativity I describe it as boundless, because I can wake up with an idea, and by 20 minutes after wake up, while my coffee's still settling in, I have a proof of concept in front of me. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This was a lot of fun, and I think part of what I really want to make sure that I convey today is that a lot of this is, I think, truly accessible now to the general public. I think that Openclaw itself is probably the instantiation of what I showed you that is perhaps requires a little bit of technical expertise, a little bit of dev expertise, understanding differences between models and things like that. But there are now versions of Openclaw that are now browser-based. So there's one I think called Claw, and you can basically do a portion of what I showed you in your browser with no setup, no Mac Mini, just a subscription and a couple minutes of making a profile, and you can have something like this. And
Amazing.
so I think we're entering an era where people will soon probably have an app on their phone that has the different agents that are useful to them. I think we're super close. I don't think we're there, but I think we're very close to anyone being able to have this empowerment that I feel right now. Like I feel like a kid in the candy store.
Yeah, basically everyone gets a software developer, it seems like. And yeah, this is quite an improvement on things. Also, I've got an observation to make about you, Nelson, because we've got a couple of samples now, a few months apart, of your development as a cognition researcher, confronted with what computer scientists are throwing at humanity, claiming that it is some form of intelligence. And our first episode was filled with examples where basically you were talking about we talked about how we can mislead people with fake satellite imagery, for example. And also I remember myself not being able to detect the AI generated images compared to the real ones that you put in front of me. And I remember the last part of the conversation was about an example of an AI threatened with the machine being turned off, and then it threatening that staff member with exposing an affair that they were having with someone as a way to stop them turning off the machine. And basically the conclusion was that it wasn't real intelligence. It's just what an LLM based on all of its training data would do without necessarily detecting peril, what all of its training data in that circumstance would instruct it to do. So you were reluctant even in that instance to assign intelligence. But here we are, it's the second episode, and you're in the middle of, basically feeling like you've 10x'd yourself, and you're able to enjoy this, immensely higher degree of productivity. I at least can detect a huge amount of enthusiasm coming out of you as a cognitive science researcher. I will say that. But you said, still, we don't have AGI. So I'm keen about the next episode.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think it's wild to think how little time has passed between the first episode and now. And I think part of the enthusiasm is coming from the general, like what they call like the DevX, the developer experience. And ChatGPT, when you need it to do something, will generate for you code on your screen that you need to know how to copy and paste. And this has basically turned the development experience into natural language, to the point where even my daughter earlier today was telling me that operating system thing you were showing me, do you mind if it like looks like this or does this other thing? And I just typed it in exactly how she said. Like I didn't even have to water it down, change it, make it more professional. I just gave it exactly how she gave it to me. And that I think is something to be enthusiastic about.
You're an
It's
example
not.
to us
It doesn't need
all,
to be
Nelson.
cognition to be that. It can still be really cool. Um,
Right, and because I also have a 5-year-old daughter, and you're making me feel incredibly inferior. This is what I should be doing as a father of a 5-year-old. Where's my Mac Mini that I'm developing?
so my way of thinking about it, I think, is I'm creating this so that other parents can, do more functional screen time, and kids can then go back to doing like, going to the garage sale from the kid next door. I hope to, be able to help, and, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. It's been really cool again.
No, yeah, I absolutely 100% appreciate it too, Nelson. Yeah, looking forward to the next one. Needless to say.